Hi guys, this is Squishy Bee. I wanted to read an article to you today that has me wigging out just a little bit. I'm telling you ahead of time that it's a very sciencey, very technical medical journal. Okay, so it's a little long and a little bit hard to follow, but I think it's really important that you hear this. I just read basically the first section of it, and that's all I needed to hear to really know, okay, I got to get this out here quickly because people need to hear this. So I'm going to read this to you in real time, so please bear with me on the really big, long, technical words. So, the name of the article is A New Approach to Evaluating the Risk-Benefit Equation for Dual Use and Gain of Function Research of Concern. This article is by Michael J. Imperial and Arturo Quesadaval, and they are from the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, University of Michigan, and Department of Molecular Microbiology and Immunology at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. So let's take a look. In the 21st century, biology faces a problem that has previously vexed other disciplines such as physics, namely the prospect that its knowledge domain could be used to generate biological agents with altered properties that enhanced their weapon potential. Biological weapons bring the additional dimension that these could be self-replicating, easy to manufacture, and synthesized with commonly available expertise. This resulted in increasing concern about the type of research done and communicated, despite the fact that such research often has direct societal benefits, bringing the dual-use dilemma to biology. The conundrum of dual-use research of concern was crystallized by the so-called gain-of-function type of experiments in which avian influenza viruses were endowed with the new properties in the laboratory, such as increased virulence and the capacity for mammalian transmission. Is any of this starting to sink in at all of why I'm concerned about this particular article and what's going on? And most people have no idea that this was going on. After more than a decade of intensive discussion and controversy involving biological experiments with dual-use potential, there is no consensus on the issue except for the need to carry out such experiments in the safest conditions possible. Right. There's a safe condition in which to carry this out, is there? Is there? I don't think so. In this essay, we review the topic with the hindsight of several years and suggest that instead of prescribing prohibitions and experimental limitations, the focus should be on the importance of scientific questions at hand. We posit that the importance of a scientific question for medical and scientific progress provides a benchmark to determine the acceptable level of risk in biological experimentation. Is there an acceptable level of risk? Should the public be in on this decision-making just a little bit? I think that we should. I think we should have some say in what is allowed to be done in these labs. But moving on to our introduction. The use of technology to gain an advantage in human conflict is ancient. Iron replaced bronze in weapons, and history is replete with examples of how scientific and technological advances were adapted for war and the acquisition of power. In fact, all technologies are potentially dual use. This trend accelerated with the expansion of knowledge following the scientific and industrial revolutions and affected primarily the disciplines of physics and chemistry, domains of knowledge containing information that was then immediately useful in warfare. The application of biological knowledge to conflict came later, even though biological warfare also has a long history. For example, the Black Death that devastated medieval European society may have begun by an act of biological warfare during the siege of Kaffa in 1346.
British settlers to North America brought smallpox-infested blankets as gifts, and they put gifts in quoteses, to Native Americans. However, it was not until the molecular biology revolution in the late 20th century that the potential of biology, and in particular microbiology, and biological warfare and terrorism came into focus. These fears came true with a single act of terrorism involving the mailing of anthrax spores in the U.S. in 2001, which caused several deaths and considerable disruption to the government facilities such as congressional offices and the postal system. I remember that whole situation, actually. By the way, I'm not going to read off the sightings that they list here. What I'm going to do is just link this entire article so you can see who they cite here in my description box below the video, because that would just kind of get annoying, I'm sure, if I just cite everything throughout this whole article. It's long enough as it is. So anyways, as I was saying, this act of bioterrorism catalyzed a series of events that led to greater awareness of the potential of using biological knowledge in nefarious ways. New regulations in biological research in the U.S., such as the Select Agents and Toxins list, and heightened concerns about some types of microbiology research. One of the immediate effects of the post-2001 environment was increased scrutiny of published findings, and several papers were particularly noteworthy for eliciting discussion and concern. In 2001, researchers in Australia showed that insertion of the gene for IL-4 into the ectromelia virus genome defeated vaccine immunity, a report that drew immediate concerns because of its possible implication for similar effects with variola major virus. Similarly, the finding that complement inhibition potential variola virus virulence suggested a mechanism for enhancing its pathogenicity. This is a good spot for me to just mention, for anyone who isn't aware of this, terrorists tend to have some really smart scientists working for them. They have doctors and scientists that are also very nefarious and don't have our best interest at heart. So they can very easily take this information and use it against anyone in the world. So for anyone who thinks that terrorists are just people that are poor and uneducated and just make bombs out of, crock pots and such, no, there are some very smart, educated people that are in these terrorist groups that know how to take some very dangerous journals that are out there and turn it into a very terrible weapon and use it against us. So that's what they're talking about here. Okay, moving on. An analysis of the U.S. milk distribution system revealed vulnerable nodes where the introduction of botulinum toxin could lead to mass casualties, leading to an outcry about journals publishing research that could be exploited by terrorists. Exactly what I was just saying. Advances in molecular biology led to the chemical synthesis of poliovirus and the reconstruction of the 1918 pandemic influenza virus, which greatly heightened concern about the reintroduction of extinct, controlled, and new viruses to naive human populations. Are you starting to get what I'm putting down here? Do you see why I'm concerned? In this environment, the U.S. government created the National Science Advisory Board for Biosecurity, NSABB, in 2005 to provide guidance on issues related to biological risk and security. Both authors of this article were inaugural members of the NSABB and served on that board for 9 years. When the NSABB first began their deliberations, one of the major early topics was that of dual-use research in the biological sciences. This issue had previously vexed the physics community in the 20th century as advances in physics and associated technologies had led to radar,
nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and other military hardware. However, there was little or no precedent for similar concerns in the biological research community, especially since biological weapons were outlawed by the Biological Weapons Convention in 1972. Okay, I just want to say here that these things that they outlaw worldwide and things like the Geneva Convention, nobody listens to these things. Okay, maybe some of, these countries, but most of them just poo-poo that stuff. They do whatever they want, and everybody just accepts that this is what's going on. Because they themselves are doing the same thing. They just do it in secret. So I assure you this, because I've spoken to multiple soldiers who still have PTSD for things that they had to do that were against the Geneva Convention laws. And these were people from the U.S., by the way. And we're so high and mighty and claim to be so much more civilized than other countries, but that's nonsense, okay? I'm not talking about, I don't want to put down normal soldiers, okay? I have soldiers in my family, and I'm married to one. So it's not that I'm saying anything against our military men. I'm just saying that those who are in power and that are leading our country are not nice people. Okay, let's continue here. Moreover, the term dual use, which had meant civilian and military use in the physics arena, was redefined in its application to biology by an NRC report in 2004 to mean technologies and information that had both beneficial and maleficent use. Nevertheless, among the early accomplishments of the NSABB was formulating a definition for dual-use research of concern, DURC, which limited the scope of worrisome work to a small subset of biological research. Just a itty-bitty small subset, that's all. The NSABB also generated a set of recommendations for communicating DURC in publications and other venues. The work of the NSABB proceeded quietly in relative obscurity until 2011, when the U.S. government learned about 2 submitted manuscripts reporting that highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, HPAIV, could be made mammalian transmissible by laboratory passage in ferrets, and sought an opinion from the board as to whether publication should be permitted. Ferrets, huh? How about also bats? How about also pigs? How about also fowl? The Great Gain of Function GOF Controversy. Before considering the GOF controversy involving influenza virus, it is worthwhile reviewing what is meant by GOF and the limitations of the lexicon in the controversy. At the most basic level, a GOF experiment, as the name implies, is one that gives a biological entity any new property. Pause. Okay, should we be giving biological entities new properties? Is the world not dangerous enough for these people? Do we really need to be making viruses more contagious and smarter and, more difficult to kill? I don't think we need to be doing these things, but that's just me. GOF experiments can be highly beneficial and can generate pest-resistant crops, microbes expressing proteins for medical therapies such as recombinant human insulin and new cancer therapies, by enhancing lymphocyte function. Okay, let me just say this. New cancer therapies, this is their excuse for this. We don't need your new cancer therapies, first of all, because there is already a cure for cancer. I can say this because someone sat down with me over dinner and told me the cure for cancer, and it has nothing to do with enhancing lymphocyte function. It has to do with pancreatic enzymes. And this person was a alternative medicine physician, and they explained to me how the people that did come up with this and that she had studied under, they were killed for curing cancer. That's their payment for their troubles of helping the world fight off this horrible, horrible disease. And that is because there are some very terrible people that are running things that are making us sick, keeping us sick, and making a great deal of money off of us. And that includes cancer therapies. So I'm very sorry for those of you out there that are dealing with this horrible disease as cancer, but what I would recommend to you is that you seek out an alternative medicine physician. And that's, if you can find a good one that, has studied this and that is still alive. Okay, because they tend to be suicided.
Okay, moving on. The controversial aspects of GOF experiments in microbiology arise when microbes are modified to have new properties that can enhance their virulence and transmissibility, because such experiments raise worries about new diseases, outbreaks, pandemics, biosafety, and biosecurity. In the experience of the authors, the NSABB probably did not anticipate what a problematic dual-use paper would look like until they had the opportunity to consider the two papers that reported the gain of mammalian transmissibility for HPA-IV.
Okay, I'm sorry to keep interjecting here, but I have got to say something. There is either one of three things going on here. Either these are just the dumbest people on the planet to think that they could put these things in the journals and that terrorists would see them and go, this is such a great idea. Let's just take these viruses and enhance them and use them as a biological weapon. The second idea is that they actually did do this themselves. The people that are running our countries, the ones that claim to be the holier than thou types, like the United States, in which I live, by the way, so I can say that. They actually made the viruses themselves, used them upon whoever they felt like, such as Ebola against Africa, various things that they do for either experimentation or to make money, basically. And they then used these journals as a backup way to say, well, we didn't do this. Maybe it's possible that the terrorists just saw these journals and got the idea from there. I don't know. I guess it's possible. But in reality, they knew that they had done this themselves, and that they're just putting these journals out here as a secondary thought to, blame it on these journals and then blame it on the terrorists, just like they did, so many times. Example, 9/11. So then the third one is that they are actually just knowing that this could happen with these journals, but they just care more about money, than they do public safety. So they're like, well, I suppose it is possible that, this could wipe out the whole world, but I really enjoy money and I'm going to make a lot of it. So it's an acceptable risk to me. So you choose. We don't know. We probably never know, but it's one of those three things that I can tell you. What made the two papers highly controversial was that they reported that only a few amino acid changes were sufficient to confer mammalian transmissibility to the H5N1 HPAIV, and there was concern that this information could be used to generate a virus capable of pandemic potential with high mortality by anyone with basic molecular biology and virology skills. Super! The NSABB initially recommended redacting the sequence information, but this was considered not feasible given the legal framework in the U.S., and the two papers were eventually published in 2012 after some modifications to the text. The arguments, counter-arguments, and events surrounding that episode are described in various publications, often by the participants themselves, and will not be repeated here. The major outcome of the Great GOF Controversy of 2012 is that it defined and crystallized some of the issues of dual-use research in biology by providing clear examples of experiments that were of great scientific value, while also raising biosecurity and biosafety concerns. Although both papers were eventually published with full information, so they went ahead and published them anyways, the debate and controversy did not solve the central questions of what work should be performed moving forward and how it should be reported. In fact, the controversy erupted again in the summer of 2014 following the publication of additional papers describing other GOF experiments, as well as a series of biosafety lapses at U.S. government laboratories. So somebody tattled on how unsafe it is at these labs, which led the government to impose a pause on these types of experiments with certain viruses until the NSABB could formulate new recommendations and guidelines. The pause was lifted in mid-December 2017 alongside policy guidance about how GOF funding decisions should be made going forward. You know what comes to my mind when I'm reading all of this? I keep thinking about that Timothy Cunningham that that supposedly committed suicide, that had all of this mysterious stuff around him when he disappeared for a period of time. He had worked at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, and he disappeared one day. And this man was known for speaking out against the flu vaccine. So that whole thing is just so suspicious and sketchy. And I think that maybe he was aware of some really sketchy stuff going on there, and he tried to either get out and tell people, or he was speaking a little too loudly, and somebody thought he should shush. And so they thought that they would, hold his head under the water for a little bit in a river, and then say that it was suicide. Like, people so often just go to rivers and just stick their head under the water and kill themselves by drowning. So common. Anyways, and what was up with the weird crystals this guy had in his pocket? Did anybody notice that he was found with crystals in his pocket? What is it with these people? It's like such an occult thing. These people always have got these crystals with them. I think, something really evil was going on there with that whole situation. And it makes me wonder about the people running the CDC.
I don't mean to sound mean. I mean, it's possible that the guy genuinely was not in the occult or anything, and he would just really like to collect the shiny things. Or maybe the people that killed him were the occult people, that's more likely, and they stuck him in his pocket for some creepy occult purpose. But, I mean, it did say that he likes to collect the crystals, but who knows, if this is really true, if this is just some sort of fake news that was added for, I can tell you this, just from my experience with Satanists, that they do speak to each other through weird ways. Like, they will do little things like that, where they will put something in a news report that other people wouldn't have any idea what it means, but people that are in their, satanic groups would know the meaning of it and be like, okay, this is one of our people that, killed this man, that sort of thing. And so I could see where it could be something like that. But, I just wanted to add that to make sure that people didn't think I was just assuming that this man, this man that was killed, I think could genuinely be the good guy in this, and that he was trying to sound the alarm about what's going on. And remember, I was already saying that something is very, very wrong with the flu vaccine, because a neighbor of mine was perfectly healthy, a 13-year-old, and she went in to get, a flu shot in before all of this stuff happened, like at the very beginning of December. It was before Christmas, and she was dead within 48 hours of some deadly flu. Okay, and it makes me very suspicious that that was this COVID-19 and not the deadly flu that they claimed that it was. And if it was some deadly flu, then why the crap is it in a vaccine, number one? And number two, why aren't people talking about some other flu that kills you within 48 hours? The normal flu should not be killing people within 48 hours, especially a healthy 13-year-old. So these are all questions that are going through my mind. And as I'm reading this article and seeing that people are doing all these things in America, in these labs, it makes me think, well, maybe this virus did start here and not in China.
Publication quandaries. One of the most vexing questions of the problem of dual-use research is publication of scientific findings. In the U.S., the research community is guided by National Security Decision Directive, or NSDD 189, formulated in 1985 by the Reagan administration, which states that all fundamental research results could be published freely. In other words, there was either open publication or classification and nothing in between. Viewed from the context of NSDD 189, the papers involved in the 2012 GOF controversy were either to be published in their entirety or classified, with the latter alternative being impractical and unfeasible since the work had been carried out in an unclassified environment. With this binary policy, redacting papers because they might contain information useful for nefarious purposes is not an option unless export control regulations are invoked. For a full discussion of the legalities involved, see blah 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 report, and basically, read why you're not worth the extra effort in this case. Consequently, when faced with GOF papers containing information that could conceivably be used to enhance the pathogenicity or transmissibility of a virus, editors and journals have almost always opted for full publication, usually requiring more details from the authors about biosafety and biosecurity methods, and often publishing an accompanying editorial emphasizing the scientifically useful aspects of the research. And then it gives an article where you can go read some examples. Such decisions have sometimes elicited strong criticism from members of the virology community. I'm sure it did. And did those people somehow accidentally shoot themselves in the back of the head after? because I'd love to see how many of these people that give strong criticism are still around to talk about it. Just saying. A more recent situation illustrates the difficult issues faced by authors, editors, and journals when publishing papers that contain DURC. In 2013, the Journal of Infectious Disease faced the quandary of receiving a paper reporting a new botulinum toxin that was resistant to neutralization by the then available anti-sera. In response, the journal took the remarkable decision of publishing the paper without the toxin sequence and vowed to keep the data confidential until an antidote was available. A major factor in withholding the sequence data was the realization that this toxin could be easily produced using standard techniques if the toxin sequence was available, and that the availability of such a toxin might pose a major public health risk. The decision was highly controversial, since without the sequence information, other investigators could not verify the findings reported in the publication or to begin to develop medical countermeasures. In fact, subsequent work revealed that the new toxin was indeed neutralized by available sera, thus diminishing the initial concerns. On one hand, withholding the sequence information from public scrutiny was the responsible action given the potential threat, while on the other hand, such an action delayed verification of the findings and the generation of countermeasures had the threat been real. Clearly, manuscripts containing DURC pose vexing problems for journals that often must make such decisions alone. At American Society for Microbiology journals, there are protocols in place for reviewing such manuscripts, and the journals have available many individuals with microbiological and safety expertise who can provide input. Other situations are likely to pose different challenges, but it is clear that journals are often poorly equipped to handle the difficult problems involved in publishing DURC content. In this regard, we have argued for the need of a national board that can help journals make publication decisions, although to date no such body exists. Another major challenge to the control of DURC information is the emergence of preprint servers in biology that allow the posting of research findings before peer review, and the proliferation of predatory open access journals that will publish essentially any paper for a fee. Consequently, there now exist alternative systems for publication, even if standard journals decline to publish a particular article over DURC concerns. Bypassing traditional publication methods could also allow authors to avoid government scrutiny. The situation today. It is not an exaggeration that the situation today regarding DURC and GOF experiments remains highly unsatisfactory. Experimental work involving GOF experiments on pathogens with pandemic potential is highly regulated, with proponents of such work arguing that restrictions on experimental design are unwarranted, while opponents of such experiments argue that such work cannot be justified. Proponents of GOF experiments have noted that data generated in such experiments is useful in epidemiological, say that 3 times fast, surveillance, whereas opponents have argued that such work cannot be morally justified because of its inherent risk. In the U.S., government-mandated pauses on certain types of experiments remain in effect for federally funded research, but such prohibitions do not extend to other countries or to work funded by other sources. Although the NSABB continues to analyze and debate the issues involved with DURC and GOF experiments in the U.S., there is no comparable body on the international scene where much of this type of research is done. There is no consensus in the scientific community on whether the value of some experiments justifies the risks involved. The central problem in finding a consensus is that the value of the research cannot be measured in real time, while assessments of risk involve assumptions that can lead to widely divergent estimates. For example, some risk-benefit calculations have suggested that a high-consequence accident is likely to occur in the near future. while others have estimated such probabilities to be near zero. So kind of like how maybe someone might step out of a Wuhan laboratory with a little bit of this stuff on the bottom of their shoe. Maybe. Or on, their clothing, or any number of things. Or perhaps someone could take this and sell it to the highest bidder. However, there is some evidence that the incessant debate, which shows no sign of resolution, is taking its toll on the virology community, as shown by surveys suggesting that scientists in training may avoid these areas of research. I'm sure I would too. This is of particular concern given the recent years have seen new viral threats in the forms of the West African Ebola outbreak, the emergence of Zika virus in the Americas, and Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus in the Arabian Peninsula, highlighting the importance of virology in human preparedness against pandemic threats. One of the most important developments in the past few decades has been a change in the zeitgeist of the field that concerns itself with the DURC research and GeoF experiments. In the early years of the 21st century, as the U.S. reeled from the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which were shortly followed by the anthrax spore attacks, the focus was primarily on biosecurity. At that time, the concern was that terrorists and state actors, not those actors, well, maybe those actors, would use the tools of molecular biology revolution to create new and more devastating biological weapons. However, as the years passed and no new attacks developed, combined with the attribution of the anthrax spores in mail attacks to a lone insider in a U.S. government laboratory, this security threat appeared to recede. At the same time, a series of unfortunate biosafety lapses in government laboratories heightened concerns about biosafety. Hence, today, people, at least those outside the security community, appear to be more worried about an unintended release of a pathogen with pandemic potential than a deliberate biological attack. Unbelievable. This change in emphasis from biosecurity to biosafety has developed slowly and could easily change if there is another deliberate biological attack, or if becomes apparent that adversaries are developing biological weapons. A major problem contributing to the unsatisfactory nature of the current situation is that the NSABB definition of DURC does not work well in day-to-day practice. The NSABB defined DURC as life sciences research that, based on current understanding, can be reasonably anticipated to provide knowledge, information, products, or technologies that could be directly misapplied to pose a significant threat with broad potential consequences to public health and safety, agricultural crops and other plants, animals, the environment, material, or national security. Although the crafting of this definition was a major achievement at the time in being able to limit the scope of DURC to a relatively small portion of biomedical research, thus leaving the most biological research to proceed unfettered, subsequent experience showed that the clause reasonably anticipated, in quotes, is so subjective in nature that it requires a risk assessment beyond the capabilities of most scientists, reviewers, and editors. In essence, the definition was helpful in keeping whole swaths of biological research outside the DURC category, such as cancer and immunology research, but it's difficult to apply in determining what is included in the DURC definition. Also contributing to an unsatisfactory situation are concerns whether such regulations as the Select Agents and Toxins list help or hinder societal security. On one hand, placing great restrictions on the accessibility to a number of agents and toxins does increase security by making them more difficult to obtain, with the caveat that these are naturally occurring agents that could be obtained from nature by a determined actor. On the other hand, there is the concern that focusing on lists and a relatively short list of agents means that the overwhelming majority of microbial threats are not on the DURC radar screen. For example, Zika virus emerged as a pathogen of pandemic potential with little or no anticipation from experts. Hence, making lists and focusing attention on those agents in the list has the paradoxical potential to reduce biosecurity, since regulations are tightened for listed agents, possibly hindering research, while other dangerous agents are neglected. A similar argument applies to the current DURC oversight policy of the U.S. government, which is focused on a specific list of agents. This process, which is akin to searching under the lamppost, carries great danger because it ignores what could be significant threats. In this regard, it is noteworthy that fungal pathogens are seldom considered as biological threats, despite the fact that members of this kingdom have significant weapon potential. Remember that serious yeast problem, that horrible super yeast fungus thing that was going around that was killing everybody not too long ago? That's what comes to my mind. And that was a really scary thing. It was just multiplying and would just cover the entire room in just a short period of time. No matter how quick they would clean it, it would just come right back. Horrifying stuff. Against this backdrop of dissatisfaction is the fact that science continues to progress very rapidly, introducing new technologies such as CRISPR-Cas9, gene drives, and more efficient synthetic biology, each of which brings with it new possibilities for research that improves the human condition. That's to be debated. As well as new tools for nefarious purposes. Yes, exactly. That CRISPR-Cas9 crap, it should be banned. But you know it's not going to be. Things are just going to get worse and worse. Not to sound like a negative Nancy, but this is just the Bible. Does the Bible say things will get horrible, really, really bad? There's going to be disease and pestilence, and then suddenly it all gets better, and then Jesus comes back. No. No. It says it gets worse and worse, like a woman in labor, right up into the birth, and the birth is the rapture. That's basically what the Bible is saying. And as a woman, I can tell you that, who has had children, that, once those contractions start and they get closer and closer together, you just don't have a chance to catch your breath before the next one, and each one gets worse and worse until there is just no denying that this baby is coming. And that is where we are right now. We are like fully dilated. We're talking about the end of labor where the baby is about to be born. That is where we at. That's where we at. That's where we're at. In the process of Bible prophecy. Anyway, where do we leave off here? Furthermore, as the technologies improve, they are increasingly accessible for more individuals and countries for whom this type of research was previously beyond reach. Hence, the problem of DURC is likely to become significantly more urgent in the near future. The way forward. In a world where new infectious agents that can rapidly spread among vulnerable populations are described on a regular basis, humanity needs a healthy research establishment focused on microbial threats. It is estimated that there are a minimum of 320,000 mammalian viruses. Some fraction of these are probably zoonotic events waiting to happen. As Ian Malcolm, the fictional character created by Michael Crichton, I don't know who that is, Michael Crichton in the novel, the guy who wrote Jurassic Park, stated, life finds a way. Information and knowledge are the best defenses against these threats. In addition to terror from nature, a new crisis will almost certainly occur in the future arising from a deliberate attack, a new provocative paper, or another biosafety lapse. Very, very interesting. GeoF experiments and DURC research are essential for preparedness, and the question is not whether this research should be pursued, but rather how to do it safely and mitigate risk. Is it really? Is it really not whether this research should be pursued, but rather how to do it safely and mitigate risk? Just think on that for a second. No, this research should not be pursued. Not just pursue it with minimal risk. I don't think that any of this risk is worth it. How about asking the people that are dying, the people that are out there burying family? Well, they can't even bury their family members. Their family members are being cremated by the gazillions right now. How about we ask them instead of all of these hoity-toity, educated in quotesies, people out there who are, making all these decisions. I think that we should be making this decision as, the human race. Anyways, to date, each of the controversies has been reactive, with proponents and opponents of such experiments responding to a specific finding or study. After more than a decade of discussion on what constitutes DURC, benefits and risks of GOF experiments, regulations, pauses, and moratoriums, it is increasingly apparent that current approaches are inadequate for the challenges at hand. Given these limitations, we have proposed a new framework for DURC research that focuses on answering specific questions. Hence, instead of prohibiting certain types of experimentation, we suggest that the way forward is to focus on specific scientific questions and the problems that need answers. Really, this is your solution. Not prohibiting certain types of experimentation. We should just continue to make the most deadly of microbes into much more deadly microbes. Let's make them more virulent. Let's make them spread faster. Let's make them smart. Okay? This is what's happening. This is why we right now are dealing with a pandemic of a disease that thinks if you've noticed, this thing the person will show up with a cold and then they will get over that. Then they get something that is like the flu and then they get over that. Then they get this deadly pneumonia. And if they get over that, they then come down with a really terrible case of heart failure. This is why you're seeing people drop dead in the streets of China and seeing people dropping dead in Italy, because they're getting this this is clearly a biological weapon. There's no way that this thing was made in nature. This is so blatantly obvious that this was made in a lab. And it was created and tampered with to make it wipe out their immune system with the HIV, because as you can see, why is there HIV in this freaking virus? Has anyone wondered that? Because HIV lowers your immune system so that you then can't fight off this virus. This is an act of war here. This is definitely not some natural thing that you find in bats that just showed up in some market. This is something that showed up in a lab after years of somebody working on it and making it, let's see, how can I make it worse this time? And they just kept making it worse and making it worse. Okay, as to exactly who did it, that's the question. That's what we should be asking. Who did this? Not whether it was done in a lab, because to me that's for sure. We know that this was made in a lab. If you don't know this, then especially after having read me reading this article to you, then I don't know what to tell you. Okay, let's move on here. For example, if there is a need to determine whether a particular feral virus pathogen has the capacity for mammalian infection and transmission, then GOF experiments performed in safe and controlled conditions can be justified. What? No, there is no situation where these can be justified. There's no situation where there is a safe and controlled condition, because clearly that never happens. People are human. People screw up. Okay? And then there are evil people that do these things on purpose. So no, I don't understand why this person is saying that this is okay. In any situation is this okay? No. On the other hand, endowing HIV with... What? Endowing HIV? What did I just get through saying? What did I just say? They're deliberately putting this HIV into these viruses so that it destroys your immune system, and then the virus can just have its way with you. This is exactly what they're doing. It's right here in this article, and this is an older article before this started. Clearly. Ugh. All right, just breathe. Just finish this article. On the other hand, endowing HIV with new transmission properties is not a medically important GOF experiment. All human activities that involve probing the unknown, ranging from space exploration to tissue culture procedures, carry some degree of risk, and it is nature of humanity to accept risk to attain progress. Well, because humans are evil. That's why. That is why it's their nature to risk everybody else's life for progress. And progress means money. Okay, that's just what this is coming down to. It's always about the money. It's the root of all evil. So, that we are just, people that they can easily do without. This is, whether it's being done for a population control situation, I don't know, but personally, I think it's being done for the whole order out of chaos thing. Because, like I said, I come from being married to a Freemason family, and this is their motto. It's the whole order out of chaos thing. And these are the type of people that are running our world. Okay, they're all Luciferians, and they're preparing for the Antichrist, who will come in after all of this chaos is created and say, it's all okay, I have the solution, or I have the vaccine, I will solve all of your problems. And everybody will be so distraught and beaten down at that point that they would be very quick to take him up on his offer. And this is why I'm sure a whole lot of people are going to follow the Antichrist. Because hunger is a big motivator. All right? Watching your family members drown to death from this horrible pneumonia is a big motivator. After you see all these people dying like this, it's a horrible thought. Fear is a very big technique in controlling people. And this is one of the things that they're really big on, is causing fear and then using it to move people around where they want them. I can tell you this from just witnessing the many, many things over my years with these people. Opponents and proponents of this type of experimentation need to maintain open channels for continued discussion, because the dialect of ideas is likely to result in better decisions. Institutional bodies such as the NSABB need to be supported, for they constitute important venues for such discussion and recommendations that mitigate risk. In fact, it is important to create similar institutions. Are you serious? Let's throw more money at this instead of just putting money into stopping these things. Let's just throw money at these people to just make it slightly less out in the open of what they're doing, okay? That can work at the international level, since U.S.-based research is a small portion of all microbiological work done worldwide. Most importantly, we should remain optimistic that the research community can do the research necessary to obtain information critical to protect our species while minimizing the risks of such work. Right. That I'm so comforted, and I feel so safe knowing that our species is in your hands. Oh my goodness. Well, that is the article in its entirety. I don't even know what to say. All I can suggest is that we, again, know our enemy, know who to trust, and that is nobody. Trust only Jesus Christ. That's who we trust. Trust that the Holy Spirit, and that God is going to protect us from these things, because these people are not. These people are not going to protect us. They're not looking out for our best interest. I assure you of that. That much I can say.
But this I can tell you, fear is our worst enemy. God doesn't say we do not have the spirit of fear for no reason. He used that terminology, I believe, because fear is a spirit. It's a demonic thing. It comes from Satan. We shouldn't have that. That's not something that we should be walking around in nature having fear. I believe this is something that is a tactic from Satan. So if you think about it, all of these things that are going on, they're terrible, but fear itself is even worse. The damage that fear does to us, our health and our relationships, and interfering with our faith in general, is worse than the disease, I think. So let's just try to remind each other that we shouldn't be afraid, even though it is scary and it's understandable, that we need to just kind of trust that God has a plan, and it's always for our best interest. Okay, everything is done for a reason. And I can see all around me people coming to the Lord that were so dead set against it before things like this virus started. I can see a little bit happening. It was happening because of the crazy weather stuff over the last few years, where it was starting to chip away at them and wake them up a little bit. But man, am I wrong? Has this virus not woken up a great number of people and gotten people to believe, well, maybe there is a God, maybe there's something to this Bible, and people are turning to God. I've watched people that would not even speak about the Bible asking me Bible questions and asking me to pray for them or pray with them, and they're themselves praying. So this is a miracle. I can't believe how quickly things can turn around and people can come to the Lord. So this is the whole purpose of these things. Yes, there may be terrible people that are causing these things, but God is allowing it for His glory. There is a reason, and it's to show people that He is real. It's to show people that we are running out of time and that they need to hurry up and come to Him, and that they can't do it themselves, that they need God. That's the whole purpose. And so I'd like to just end this with a prayer, and then I'm going to come back and do some other videos that are tips that I think might help and get us through this, and I'll try to work on that right away after this one. Okay, so let's pray real quick. Father in heaven, thank you so much that we've been having this venue to come together on YouTube and discuss these things and fellowship together with other Christians. And I thank you for this method of sharing your word and prophecy with the lost. And I pray that this draw in people out of the dark and into the light, and that they get saved because of this virus, and that none of this is being done for nothing. And I pray that you calm everyone's fears, and that you make us feel safe, and that you remind us regularly that you've got this, and that no matter what kind of calamity is happening all around us, that you are within us, and you've already won this war. And so people can fall to our left, people can fall to our right, but we will stand. And I pray that you protect everyone that is listening to this, put a hedge of protection around them, around their family and loved ones, and keep them safe from this virus, and help them to have peace and joy in their heart, despite what's going on around them. And I thank you that we're here alive right now at this moment to be having this conversation. And I trust that because you have protected us thus far, that you will continue to do so. And even so, come, Lord Jesus. Maranatha. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.